Eric, just thinking, as a voter, do polls matter? I mean, why do people need to check on them? Because they get dumped on so often.
Oh, yes, no, and we hear it all the time. But I do think that polls do.
As you should hear it all the time. Polls do nothing but manufacture the desired result. Like the thing about how they're saying that the Bloc Québécois are not doing as well as the Liberals in Quebec. And it's because, well, the media, it's in the best interest that it's in the media's best interest that people don't think that the Bloc Québécois are doing well. But if you look at it, how are the Bloc Québécois not doing well, but the Parti Québécois, who are the provincial equivalent, doing extremely well and about to take government in the next election in 2026? Those two things are correlated. So how is it that the Bloc aren't doing well? And it's because the Liberals are doing really well. So there's a mirage that's blocking the gains that the Bloc are having in response to Trump, etc. And it's not in the Canadian media or the Canadian establishment's best interest to get it in people's heads that the Bloc Québécois and the idea of Quebec nationalism is on the rise in the lead up to an election. That is the wild card that they need to keep under wraps. And that's why I firmly believe that they're just wrong. And I'm going to keep saying this, and I'll literally put money on it that they're going to do better than their expectation, because what the media is saying they're going to do versus what's actually going to happen are far apart.
Matter in the sense that they are important sources of information. We have to remember that polls they don't exist in a vacuum. They're a reflection of public opinion. They're actually a reflection of just what Canadians think. And I think that it's always important to know what Canadians think about any issue.
Yes, they're a reflection of what Canadians think to make Canadians think. That's what they are. They are a reflection of what Canadians think to then entice Canadians to think the same. That is what polling does. It does not predict elections. It manufactures the desired result. That's what it does. It's a huge part of how Trump won in a massive landslide, is because they put in the news in the certain areas that Kamala had somewhat of a chance, that Kamala was leading in the polls. And then that makes it that the people who are otherwise indifferent then say, oh, I have to vote Trump then because I need to make it so that Kamala doesn't win. It's the opposite of the Pied Piper strategy, because both parties do the same, but in the places that it matters. In Canada, though, you can do that to a very fine tuning. And the Liberals have done this so well. The Liberals have lost the past two popular votes, though have won most seats, is because you don't need to win the majority of votes. You don't even need to win the popular vote. You just need to win the most votes in the places that matter. And that's the Canada electoralism system. And the Liberals have perfected this. And that's how I knew this was going to happen, is because they've perfected this gridlock so perfectly that you just need a little bit of leeway to move it one way to then take advantage of it. And that's the benefit that they have in comparison to the two-party system in America. That's just a binary system of out with the old, in with the new, out with the old, in with the new. In Canada, because there's a selection, it makes it so that the more politically engaged people are, the more likely they are to shake out the dice as wide as possible. The last federal election, I voted for the Animal Liberation Party because it was one of those things where it was well, my vote means nothing, so I'm going to literally vote for the party. My vote meant nothing because I lived in a riding where the Liberal was going to win by a landslide. So I placed my vote with the party that I thought was closest to my alignment in federal politics, which is the protection of wildlife, the protection of animals, etc., the humane care of animals, etc., etc. And that's the thing, is that's what people do because that's what people do. And that's going to make it so that the very clear opposition, that is the Conservatives, have less of a chance of winning, because the vote, it's the same way how Doug Ford ends up winning in Ontario, because there's no coordination with the opposition. It just splits, it's scattered, and then that's the end of it.
What are you watching for next?
Well, one of the things that I think is really going to be key in this election, and it doesn't get as much attention, when you have this epic fight between Carney and Pierre Poilievre, is the fate of the NDP. The NDP in our poll tracker has only 11% support. That is very, very low. It's looking like one of the worst performances the NDP would have if those numbers held through Election Day. And And whether those numbers are going to hold is going to be something I'm going to be watching, because the Conservatives cannot win an election when the NDP is at 11%.
The Liberals perhaps have not hit their ceilings, and the numbers are even more improved when you look at the favorability, as Eric has
Positive. There are more Canadians who either have.
As we've explained to people, we both collate polls, you assess them. Is there a trend that you see that Eric didn't mention?
Well, Eric mentioned the leaders, and I think it is an important indicator beyond what we see in the voting of Prime Minister. Even in those provinces,
Do polls matter? I mean, why do people need to check on them? Because they get dumped on so often.
Oh, yes, no, and we hear it all the time. But, I do think that polls do matter in the sense that they are important sources of information. We have to remember that polls they don't exist in a vacuum. They're a reflection of public opinion. They're actually a reflection of just what Canadians think. And I think that it's always important to know what Canadians think about any issue, be it Donald Trump, tariffs, or who they're going to vote in the next election. Now, do people need to follow the polls as closely as Philippe and I do? No, but they can just come to us and we'll tell them what the latest numbers are showing. But I do think there is a value there for voters to have a beat on actually what is happening in the course of the campaign.
So we are, as you know, we're here in St. John, New Brunswick.
Why should what the polls say have any say on your vote? You know, like, I guess I get it, but at the same time, that's still liberal democracy. That's still the gamification of democracy, where it's not a proper representation of the populace if the public then is under the impression that, like, oh, this is a really close race, so I have to pick the lesser evil to make sure that the people that they're saying are going to take power don't. That's not democratic. What's democratic is that you vote for the party that's closest to your political representation, like what your political ideology, what like your political affinity is. Your vote is that. Strategic voting and this like gamification of voting, unless it's set up in the way that like with a runoff, like how it is in France or Brazil, it's deeply undemocratic. It's liberal democracy. It's the gamification of politics, which makes it easier to control, makes it easier to generate the desired result. So yeah. Anyways, I'm going really long. It's 5 a.m. I might have to cut it short and come back in the afternoon or something. We'll see.
So Eric, I mean, it's still so early. What are you watching for next?
Well, one of the things that I think is really going to be key in this election, and it doesn't get as much attention, when you have this epic fight between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, is the fate of the NDP. The NDP in our poll tracker has only 11% support. That is very, very low. It's looking like one of the worst performances the NDP would have if those numbers held through Election Day. And whether those numbers are going to hold is going to be something I'm going to be watching, because the Conservatives cannot win an election when the NDP is at 11%. So to look at whether Mark Carney is going to become the Prime Minister or Pierre Poilievre will, one of the numbers to watch will be the score for the NDP. And right now, it's a score that is very good for the Liberals and very bad for the Conservatives.
Very briefly, Philippe.
The thing, too, that the Liberals have done is they've done a great job because of their association with the NDP, right, under Trudeau. They've done a great job of completely tarnishing the reputation of the NDP and progressive voters, people of minorities, people like Arab Canadians, the Liberals, by intentionally, just being blood-sucking criminals about the ongoing genocide in Gaza, by externalizing themselves as the boogeyman on that front and allowing themselves to just be blatantly fingered as a co-conspirator in an ongoing genocide. It's really put the stink on the NDP by association. So like all of the people who would have who got politically engaged, that's the thing, because I do believe that there's people who are going to vote NDP but who don't support Jagmeet in any way. They don't have any confidence in Jagmeet Singh as a leader, but they're still a member of the NDP, and so they're going to vote for the NDP because that's the party they belong to. If that's the case, then there might be another poll mirage, right? Because you're talking to people on the terms of Jagmeet Singh, yes or no? The NDP under Jagmeet Singh, yes or no? Those types of framed questions. Damn, yeah, I forget what I was just saying. That might be a sign that I need to wrap it up soon. if I'm talking and then forget what I'm talking about. But yeah. Oh yeah, the Mirage, the NDP Mirage, yes. Yeah, so the Liberals have done a very good job by externalizing themselves as as the boogeyman on foreign policy, by then having association with the NDP, and the NDP having this stink on them from the Liberals getting all of this, just co-signing this genocide. The stink has then got to the NDP, like the passive NDP supporters who were pushing them to be more vocal about Palestine have checked out. And they probably are either apathetic and have moved further left, or the situation that I just explained, where they're, they have no confidence in the leader, but they're still going to support the party that they're a member of. In both situations, there would be a mirage as far as what the polls say. The Liberals have done a great job, though, neutralizing the NDP by doing that. And the thing is that it was like a double-pronged strategy, because the other way is like if you also make it so that you're activating people who would otherwise not vote, but they're voting for the NDP, and with the way that it shakes out in any type of situation where power is up for grabs, the NDP needs to be aligned with the Liberals. So all you're doing is just activating more either apolitical or further left voters who then come to the NDP or come to being anti-liberal, which in the way that it shakes out, as long as they support one of the major parties on left of center, it benefits the Liberals, because the Liberals are operating under the assumption, like they were prior, that you need the support. You need friends, right? You can't make government with a minority without friends. And so they're operating under that context. And by doing that, it completely discredits the NDP. And then the NDP, because Jagmeet Singh is he talks to the supporters of the NDP like the NDP are like they're stupid, where he could simply say like, hey, look, I'm being pragmatic. I'm doing what I can with what I've been given. It's not that easy. The system is not great, blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying we're doing everything we can. We're working tirelessly, because no, you're not. You're just not willing to do the things that are needed because it would threaten your position. And that makes you controlled opposition.